Good afternoon to everybody, and a warm welcome to the ADHD Embrace and Kingston University Teacher Seminar covering neurodiversity. We're very fortunate to have Dr. Paty Paliokosta leading our presentation today. Paty is an associate professor at Kingston University and has been working with us very closely on setting up the teacher seminar program that we've set up this last year. And so is very well placed to talk about neurodiversity, as Paty chairs the STIG, which is the Special Interest Group at Kingston University dealing with neurodiversity and inclusion. So once again, Paty, thank you so much for leading this. It's highly topical. We've got Neurodiversity Week taking place later in March. And we know that schools often come to us and ask for ideas in terms of, presenting neurodiversity to class, the whole classroom, and explaining to classmates, just why certain children are different. And so Paty came up with the idea to put together basically a lesson plan and to share with you some ideas on how you can share what neurodiversity entails with children in the classroom. So Paty, can I hand to you? Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Annette. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here, and I think this is a very important topic that we are dealing with. And as Annette already mentioned, teachers often would like to do things to share with their children during this week, but sometimes it's hard to kind of put something together last minute. So we hope that we give you a little bit of time by preparing you from the 9th of February and then having almost a month to just reflect on whether some of the ideas and the bank of ideas that we'll share with you today might resonate with you and you find something useful for your school and for your different type of setting. I'm going to share my screen now so that I can share visually with you all the things that we said we're going to be doing. So you should be able to see actually the front cover as well, which we were reflecting on it with Annette earlier. It is quite fun. It is about, thinking as well in the context of this neurodiversity time that, March has been allocated as a neurodiversity week between the 21st and 27th. And I think it's also important to deconstruct what we mean by that. Is it an opportunity to raise awareness? Is it an opportunity to celebrate? And I think it's important for us, while we're doing the activities we're going to be sharing, we're not going to do the activities, but I will explain, I will go through a certain range of them. It's important to reflect on what we are actually achieving by doing them. Are we raising awareness? Or are we celebrating? Are we embedding in the curriculum? And what should be our target as educators? So this picture says, because let's, support Neurodiversity Week, because life would suck a lot more if we didn't exist, these kids say. So it's from their perspective. It's important to think through the child's voice as well. What are the positive components even to the education experience that these children bring, and what are the positive aspects that every one of us brings to the world? So it's about remembering, when we talk about inclusion here and developing, celebrating difference and developing empathy to your children, the children and young people you work with at whatever age, it's important kind of projecting to the bigger picture and realizing that we all have a significant role to play. And I think this week is a good opportunity, really. But again, as I will say in the end, I don't think it should remain the only time that we are dealing with this. As Annette kindly explained, I'm not going to go into much detail into that. I do chair the Special Interest Group on Inclusion and Social Justice at KU, which is a multidisciplinary collaboration of academics, of different charities like ADHD Embrace and Kingston Center for Independent Living. We connect with university, with UCL's CLLD lab. We try to always keep ourselves up to date in order to keep our students up to date. And we do try to research together, to do talks, to arrange opportunities for funding, and really to think forward. And that's where, as you probably know from previous seminars, that's how Annette and I have come together, and we aim at addressing many of the issues that relate to inclusion, one of which is from the point of view of neurodiversity. So our learning objective for today, I'm talking to teachers like their learning objectives, I like their learning objectives, is to provide you a bank of activities, really, to raise awareness and empathy towards children with a neurodiverse learning style. And you will find there is different vocabulary, terminology used. We use neurodivergent person or neurodiverse person. They're both acceptable. It's just you might find them in different ways in the literature or in activities you come across. And I'm using here a slide. I mean, I really like this simple way of putting the fact that, we are all different. And this is from ADHD Foundation, which also has played a significant role in developing a range of activities to which we are going to be referring to. So we're going to be trying to understand together, disability and difference by highlighting that ADHD in particular, as well as other neuro conditions, are often invisible disabilities. And I think that's something important, again, to keep in mind in whichever way you decide to address this when you're trying to create an event or a week or a month devoted to it, or affecting your lesson planning. And how are we going to be able to do that? By supporting, by developing empathy in our children, because that's long term, like I said before, projected to what happens in society or in workplace. It starts early on, and we need to use our own children in order to do that. So hopefully the resources and lesson plans that I will propose can support an inclusive environment. And I'm including as well some adaptations from the Fighting for Our Rights project that was a KU project I will refer to later on. I thought it would be important to have some reminders. I know that we've had so far, we've been building the series of webinars in a way that people develop their knowledge around ADHD. And I'm thinking, as a teacher, what would I need to know, as well? So some reminders before you plan your week or your month or your day. What do I need to know about children in my class who have ADHD? What would they need to know about me? So remember that kids with ADHD may have difficulties within a variety of ways. This could be happening at the same time or just in some aspects. So it's about, a very common one, as you know, would be about getting and staying organized, managing their time, emotional management, following your directions. So you need to think every time, and keep in mind those particular pointers, because the activities I will show you, some of them respond to particular pointers. So I hope that we all have in the end kind of a rounded perspective around this. It's hard to shift focus from one thing to another, keeping things in place and working in a balanced way, thinking before saying or doing things, which often brings them into trouble. Often children will say things before thinking through carefully, and they know they've made a mistake. They know they should have not said it, but they've done it. So they have to face the consequences. Focusing on what's important is also an issue, because sometimes they are so much affected by detail. And remember the co-occurrence we talked about, and autism spectrum disorder or condition, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, Tourette syndrome are all conditions related to neurodiversity. So it's important to think how will these affect the way a child operates. And then in terms of the teacher's point of view, on the left hand of the page, you can see, some, I'm sorry about that. You can see, some anxieties as well that operate within your thinking or your approaches. ADHD, do I have to think about treatments? Is it what people mostly know about? It's attention deficit, hyperactivity, inattention. Is it a psychiatric condition? How does it affect the childhood? So all these create kind of a complex picture for people and teachers and educators at different levels who work with children with ADHD. So really, really important as a background, I thought, to have some reminders together. And another important thing that I want to share with you here is that because it's a majorly hidden disability, it's important to know what to expect at different stages and look at addressing this through training. According to different ages, you will find that, your toddlers might present as extremely active, perhaps clumsy, not responding to orders and instructions, especially if they are long-winded, if you are not thinking carefully about how to change and address them. At school age, you start seeing different behaviors. Learning and concentration problems are quite significant and prominent. Oppositional behavior often comes with it, and sleeping problems, which then have a major effect in the way they present in your class. So you have a tired child who is not focusing, and it's not necessarily always because they can't focus at this point in time, but because of the tiredness they carry. So it's very multifaceted. And as they grow up and enter adolescence, you might find some further attention difficulties. There will be some restlessness, other comorbidity again with ODD, opposition and defiance disorder. You will see mood swings. They might resort to drug use or drug abuse. And again, the reason we're reminding them is not to perpetuate a deficit approach, but just to remember, what could it be that other children as well see in their classmates, and how can they try and attempt to understand them better through the processes that we're going to implement. And we do appreciate, I know that as teachers, you often think, how do I speak to my pupils about disability? What is the right terminology? How can I fit it within within an inclusion-friendly curriculum? Remember, we're not only talking, the Neurodiversity Week is an opportunity. We don't want it to be a token. We want it to be the start of something. So there are common dilemmas you face as teachers in relation to addressing diversity related to neurodivergence. But what is very, very important, and what we found also through that research project that I referred to, the Fighting for Our Rights project, is that real life narratives and using real life narratives are a very immediate and appropriate and effective way of addressing these and really speaking to the children, So you have from children to children, or from people who are experiencing difficulties to talk to others. So I've got for you a 10-minute video on neurodiversity, and we're not going to watch all of it together. I will play for you some parts of it. And this is something that you could use. So in a way, this is our first resource, which I think it's like an introduction to other things you can implement with them. It could be used during PSHE or as a whole school assembly. And for me, the way I approach it is to generate reflection. And then you can have plethora of smaller activities relating to that. It would be appropriate both for primary and secondary, depending on the level of children and obviously different age ranges. And I'm going to play it for you, and bear with me for a minute. Okay, so just to also say, like Annette previously explained, on the video, we will share the video. I'm very happy to share the slides as well. And the slides are live. So basically, when you receive the pack, you can click on things and you have everything, either websites or like this one is a live picture. Forgive me with the ad. Okay. .
I saw myself dealing with it all on my own. I feel like the walls are closing in on me. I convince myself to do what I've always done, walk through the pain, deal with it silently. I start to tremble, my eyes starting all over the place. I begin to struggle to breathe. I'm doing all I can. Again, I was all alone. I had to push through and get to class.
Can you tell me about how you felt when you were walking to school in the morning?
There was dread, fear. I was really shaky, and I'd always get kind of hyper aware of everything that was around me. So I would be really distracted by everything I walked past and every little kind of movement.
What led up to you feeling that sense of dread and fear as you approached school?
Maybe the fact that I was getting closer to it. I think it got worse. I think I was just kind of oh no. Everything just kind of crashed down and there was this huge weight on you. There's always going to be something really busy going on. Whether people were in the classes already or not, there was always somebody else in the corridors, and the corridors weren't exactly huge. I think it was kind of claustrophobic as well. The walls would always feel like they were kind of closing in, and I always felt like everyone around me would be staring at me, and I was kind of hyper aware still, and just be aware of everything that was happening around me, and that could get really overwhelming. It would definitely trigger my anxiety to a whole other level, and I would get very shaky, and I would hold on to inhaler, because often when I panicked, it would trigger.
So you can see some of the comorbidity that actually we've talked about before. You can see how a child who may have ASD actually be feeling extremely anxious at the same time because of the difficulties that they experience with being around people. And again, this is the hidden disability we're talking about, but people do not appreciate that this is something that is happening, but we don't know about.
Try and make my way.
Navigating the corridors, having all these people walking past you is really quite a difficult situation to deal with. And here, this is a very articulate person who is able to share this with us, Not all the time people are able, and not all children have the capacity to kind of share with others. And we have the view through their own eyes. So you can see here, we see a school class through their own perspective.
As calm and trying to do my work.
And girls often mask situations like that. People will see them as being very able to cope and not struggle, but they know how the reality operates. So their life feels like a one-way mirror. It's a very lovely animation. I mean, I'm not going to play it all for you since we can't hear it all as well. And I really don't know why this is happening. All my audio is on. But she felt like a ghost, as she explains, which is very, very interesting. Because she navigates, but she's almost feeling invisible. But something that we want to emphasize is that
doesn't make sense.
We shouldn't be looking only at the negative aspects and the tragedy side of things. It's also about thinking, how can we communicate and connect with the other children? So as you can see on the...
To help them with strategies, you need to know them first. You need to know what gives them anxiety, what they like, what they don't like.
So hopefully these types of activity and the events are going to bridge this communication gap where people are not able to appreciate for other children in their class.
And to be aware of, so that you know when maybe they're struggling, or
so we're raising awareness, as you can see from the animation, and sharing and developing something that is actually much shared by everybody. And here is the Erin Davidson, who is actually the person who used her own autobiography to achieve this. These are her wishes for this animation. So it's about demonstrating to other young people who have had the same experience through school that they are not alone, to help school staff understand what an autistic young person is experiencing at school, raise awareness to general public, and is widely used as a developmental, a learning and development aid for professionals and families. So do have a look. Obviously, as I said, when you click on it on your own computer, this will give you the whole experience. I apologize. I don't know, all the audio tabs are set up, but I don't know why it's not shared with sound. So it's quite interesting. Okay. So that's one to start with. And then I had something else for you in the context again of co-occurrence and comorbidity, which was about the balances. That this is a 2-minute video on dyspraxia, and it can be shared with pupils to raise awareness or prompt for a child. That's another thing. Stories like that could be a prompt, again, according to the level and age of your children and openness. It would give them the opportunity to just go and share in the context of a circle time, or in the context of a class assembly. You decide what is the best way to approach it in a way that is safe for the child and beneficial for them first, and then of course for the rest of the group to develop this awareness. So this little video, which is about dyspraxia and how again it relates to neurodiversity, is appropriate for both secondary and junior primary, I would say. I'm not going to play it if it's not gonna operate properly. It's only 2 minutes, but it's quite nice. I mean, I might actually just click on it for you to see. Again, it has nice visuals, I think, and children quite like, the. You can't hear it, yeah?
No, we can't.
No. It's also for. So she explains how she was diagnosed, what are the basic things she's struggling with. And you can see it's very it's black and white, simple messages. I'm late. I find it hard to balance activities. From 4 years old, she was tripping over. People didn't know why it was happening. They thought she's just clumsy. She was feeling unhappy about that. So it's quite interesting, to look at this. And then remember how we can use these in order to reflect on, right, this is an assessment. This is a diagnosed condition. How do we change the narrative? How do we flip the narrative? And how do we use it even as a positive thing? So I hope you enjoy watching it. Again, it's 2 minutes. It's really child friendly, very, very kind of structured and simple, and using all relevant terminology and appropriate terminology. So I hope you find that of some use. Next, what I've got for you is a set of activities and lesson plans by age and stage. Remember, we looked at how do neuro conditions present, in particular ADHD, at different ages and stages. So I thought I've got a little bit for everybody, and also from different approaches, from different ways you might want to approach, because you might want to address the situation directly in terms of the condition, or through a topic, which could be science, for example, and talking about the brain. And then in the context of that, you have the opportunity to share how different brains operate, and consecutively, ADHD brains are very different, and so on. something that I like very much is this, again, it's about using the narratives that I mentioned earlier, remember? There is this resource which has been organized by the people who first came up with the notion of Neurodiversity Week. So stories that never stand still. I think the name of it even kind of speaks for itself. It shifts the narrative a little bit, like we say, you know, is it bad you can't stand still? Does it mean that you're actually always on the move? Are you a very creative person? Are you thinking maybe differently to others, and you are always thinking of the next thing, which can be bad for an activity in class when a teacher expects you to do something, but it could be good in all sorts of different ways. So, you know, it's really, really important to use these real life scenarios, and they're all in comic format, which is very child friendly, and you can see, and also, although it is put in that way, it can be used, it's not childish, it's just breaking things down in a very nice way. So you have here like an alphabet, an A to Z of ADHD, and it's really nice way of presenting what does it mean, you know, to have ADHD. So A for anxiety, like I showed you in the video, people don't often realize how much anxiety comes with this, and people are sometimes breathing fast or feel nauseous because of that. People don't know that this is because of it. Other ways to manage it. If other people know it, that might actually facilitate a much better relationship, and they don't think, oh, this child is weird or doesn't like me. Because, you know, sometimes we don't realize that other children also think that they have done something perhaps, and the person is not talking to them or is being weird with them. It's about the difference of brain. B for brain, you know, again, according to the age and stage you are, you can use it in science, you can use it in literacy, and all sorts of different ways. C for creativity, D for distraction, E for energy, F for forgetfulness. I'm sure ADHD friends would agree with all these, like being a kind of an important alphabet for them. G for gloom sometimes when things are not going as planned. This, for example, is just a very nice poster for you. You could be having, you know, these are printable. You could have them in your inclusion area or somewhere in the corridor of your school, or you could have it in the class and refer to it that day you're doing this activity. So rather than feeling, oh, I have to reinvent the wheel, there is plethora of material that we've included for you here. And some nice, you know, things like the art of calm. And you know how children like to like the house rules in the school, in the class, or like all this. So this is quite important. You know, you can judge, you know, which are actually most appropriate according to the age range. And this is a very nice one. This is, and I think that would be very usable also for children with ASD, as it's very simple in the sense that, you know, it doesn't involve so much animation, so many pictures. Again, you know the groups of children you work with, you know what is most appropriate to use. So have a look at these, and on the other hand, you can see how we can have like the exact opposite. Hurrah for ADHD. You know, again, it's a celebration aspect, a lot of colors. You might want it like this for your younger learners. And again, it depends on the appropriacy of the environment. I mentioned earlier that you could be actually looking at addressing this via a topic. And here is I thought it was a very interesting type of activity in the context of science for Key Stage 3, Key Stage 4 children, where you're talking about aspects of different sides of the brain, different parts of the brain, what different activities are these parts of the brain responsible for, and then through this, basically scaffold with your children the differences that exist with children who have ADHD or other types of neurodiversity. So I will show you as well. Here is like a whole activity prepared for you. Curriculum links are with science or psychology, biology, sorry, even design technology, depending on how you want to do it. And it does talk about fish brains and dreams. It's a quite, I thought, creative title to talk about really nutrition and the brain and different functions of the brain. And here there's a lot of references about understanding how nutrition affects neurodiversity and learning differences such as ADHD, dyspraxia, dyslexia, and ASD. So they're pretty easy to achieve. You know, and there are different activities really. So you can see, depending on the level of your children, aim to consider the functions of left and right side of the brain, consider some core concepts of neuroscience, and so on. So it's very kind of science oriented in that way. You can, you know, address some of the things, again, reinforcing correct terminology, especially if you find cases in your school where children are using derogatory terminology and maybe having bullying behaviors towards their classmates. Moving on to another I would say that would be an entry activity, really, the one I'm expecting to appear in the screen. Come on. I'm clicking on it, but I think can you see a new one, or do you still see the brain one?
We've got activity 3. Oh, there we are. No, there we are. We've got a new.
That's what we needed. Like, right. So this is about, this is like, I would say it's a neurodiversity entry activity, which is very simple to achieve. And really what you are expected, what you will be doing with your children is to, even without telling them what you're doing, you're not going to tell them you're working on your diversity. You're not going to tell them we're doing something relating to inclusion. All you're going to ask them is to do an activity where you are all, well, the purpose is to explain that we should not judge someone by their performance on a test, right? And because it does not tell us the whole story. And to unpick this, you're going to ask people, you only need just yellow paper, red paper, and you give the colors to the children, to the groups of children, and a glue stick, pen, envelope for each group. And then you ask them very quickly you give them instructions very quickly, and you ask them to do the following. Take the yellow paper. You can see there is a series of instructions. So you're asking them to do the instructions, and then the group that finishes first will win, right? So in that way, you are going to be able to say to people, right, so this is what happened. And then you need to unpick whether there were any limitations there for some people. Is it a fair way to run an activity? Does this mean that the group that finished first was necessarily the best? Do you see what I mean? It's about unpicking all the different, and then in that way you can start talking to your children about, you know, what does smart mean? Because children have some set beliefs about what being smart or clever means, being good at things. So it's a very kind of like, that's why I call it an entry activity, because it's quite plain, but actually it enables children to reflect about equity, right? Not equality, because equality is about them having the same activity. So you give everybody the same, get set, go, outcome. And you judge those that finished first. So that's important actually for all of us to think. This is the starting point for differentiation, isn't it? And I'm sure the teacher and student teacher colleagues are going to be able to really connect to that. So I hope that might be useful, because it's a very easy way to do that with your children. Then I'm going to, again, very quickly signpost you as we said, and then again, all the material is there for you to, it's still not showing, I see. Click. Okay. Yep, okay. This is taken from the Fighting for Our Rights. This is like our gem from KU. This is a multidisciplinary collaboration that was involved in a couple of years ago with Kingston Center for Independent Living. And what we did was to create a resource that was keeping the disability rights movement alive. This involved, we had funding from Heritage Lottery Fund, and the idea was to have an online archive that exists there for you. You can click on it, it's there, it's nationally available. And it was capturing the real life narratives. Remember, I said the real life narrative is so important for people to understand and engage with disability and difference. Of 23 people that were part of the disability rights movement agenda back in the 60s, between the 60s and the 90s. Now, what we did with that as well, part of the project was that the nursing students, so it was a collaboration between a charity, School of Nursing, School of Education. And the nursing students actually interviewed these people and created a bank of resources that is available there with audio, video, and so on. And then the education students took the narratives and created those lesson plans that then tried to unpick how disability operates in different contexts. And it's a cross-curricular project, cross-curricular lesson planning, and the material work with each other. So again, it was reinforcing the whole idea of how do I speak to my children? How do I approach this kind of perspective, interdisciplinarity? So, and really avoid situations like bullying and so on. So if I click on this one, it will take us to the actual project page, the school resource pack. So you can see that we have here 13 lesson plans. They're ready-made again for you. You can just go on them, click, and they give you different approaches and different perspectives. So we are, one is about understanding disability, for example. Again, in the context of PSHE, perhaps, then it links with English. So it's about developing empathy skills. So if I just go to one and give you some examples, they look like that. This was designed for year 6, but actually we have used it even in higher education with nursing students or other environments. You can modify as appropriately. And you can, I'm connecting them to success criteria and learning objectives and national curriculum references as well. And you can see that there is some kind of, history and PSHE are connected as well, because we like this kind of cross-curricular approach. It's quite nice. You might decide that when you do something for neurodiversity, you use a whole day and you use the different curriculum areas to address this. So even your science, as we said, session could be relating to that. But again, if you explore this material, it will give you ways of approaching this. This particular one was about building resilience. So quite important. Again, you have all the things you need to think about and use. And it connects with the national curriculum because we are expected as teachers to consider personal identities and the factors that can affect a positive sense of self. What a better opportunity actually to link it to neurodiversity, and explain and appreciate the importance of diversity. And, we are expected to do that, but it doesn't happen enough. We do know that. We do know that there isn't enough curriculum links related to diversity. And recognize that bias and prejudice should always be challenged appropriately. So it's part of the requirements of your work. And as teachers that standard 5 is one that is actually very much addressed by all these activities. So again, for the development of resilience one here, it is about, looking at you can see I have the lesson outline, asking the pupils if they know of anyone who might have certain needs. You want sometimes to do it around other people, or you might want to have a person in the center who might share. Again, you are the ones to judge how appropriate that would be. Also, I want to mention at this point that I said these are already made for you, but if you decide to use, please feel free to tailor them, obviously, around the needs of your class. And they might seem too long for you, or or short, or the focus should be somewhere else. I'm happy to say as well that we have managed to use this material in an adapted way with children who have complex learning disabilities, because the idea is that everyone needs to know about hidden disabilities and identity. And we found, the student, well, there is an alumni student teacher who was involved with us after the project, and she made those changes and adaptations. And as you can see, it's very visual. It is all about scaffolding identity and understanding identity and the notion of disability. What we found was that these children had never up to this point thought or asked about anything in relation to that. So it's really worth realizing that the concept of disability and inclusion needs to be reinforced early on for our early years children, but also to be adapted as much as possible for all our children at all different levels. Yeah, because I think we need, in terms of intersectionality, and I'll say that in the end, we must remember that somebody with ADHD, we must not have just one set picture of a child who has maybe a neurodiverse profile as in an otherwise high-functioning middle-class profile. Does it make sense? It could be that there are also other co-occurrences and other profiles that are there. And not forgetting our early years colleagues and children. What I've got here for you is a little book that very recently came out by my colleague Teresa Nash Patel, and it's called Ubuntu the Lion with a Long, Long Mane. And the whole idea is about giving children access to understanding difference, but also explore feelings of choice, love, and humanity. Annette is South African, so she will be very familiar with the term of Ubuntu, which is a philosophy, a South African philosophy, really, and it supports us in enacting it. Wherever we grow, live, play, and work. The idea here is that the way that the author wrote this book is to support this philosophy, is to use this philosophy to support us as teachers, as educators, as parents in enacting it wherever we grow, live, play, and work. And remember that we're all one. And this is really important, again, when you are creating those events for your children, because you need to somehow explain to the kids that that we're all a chain, and if there is trouble in one part of the chain in the class, things won't work really well. So I think this is a nice exploration in that book about this lion that had a very long, long mane. He couldn't actually run because of this. He hated the rain because it was so heavy. It was making the mane so heavy that he couldn't actually walk, and he hated to roar. And then he met another lion that actually listened to the story, and that is the key thing. He listened to the story and helped him realize that everyone is different, and then to share their own story with all the other lions who actually, unlike what he thought, were also happy to listen to his story. And all this unravels there, and we can see, the importance of friendship within the context of difference, which is another thing you want to empower and promote, especially with your young children. So to kind of summarize, within the Neurodiversity Celebration Week, and I have again a link for you to go to and see how you can get involved and register your school, please think about what will be your chosen way of making a difference. Is it about putting up posters of successful neurodivergent individuals? And in that link that I've included there's a lot of that. You can do that. That's a kind of a straightforward way of doing it. Some people have been doing it for years, but perfectly acceptable. Again, depends on where you are as a setting as well, because I'm saying all this, I'm not assuming that you do nothing. I'm not assuming that you know nothing. I'm just making some suggestions that you can appropriately choose. Having your diversity theme school assembly, that could be what you choose to do, and it's a one-off, or maybe then follow it up with some activities in class. have some neurodivergent parents coming, or a neurodivergent member of the local community to speak. Remember the importance of real life narrative. The voice helps people connect. Encourage the neurodivergent students to share their stories and their talents in that attempt, as we said, to change the narrative, shift the narrative, because it's important to share the difficulties, but also the talents and the goodness. We don't want to put down the children. We don't want to present them as someone who needs pity. Put up ADHD, autism, dyslexia, and dyspraxia fact sheets, again, like with the neurodivergent individual stories. That's, again, something visual, easy to access. And ask children, actually, to research. Like, children do all sorts of things, like in history. They do detective stories, and they write about their favorite historian. Or why don't you invite them to find a very important neurodivergent individual who contributed to the world in a very successful way? And really, this is a very important celebration of the fact that everybody can contribute and actually make a change to the world. And run activities to promote inclusion and empathy. And some of these I shared with you already, like Ubuntu, or, the Fighting for Our Rights project activity, or the equity one. Now, some red alerts I thought we should be keeping in mind, because I know you're all very reflective, and I know that you want to do it right. And I think there's nothing worse than addressing these kind of issues in a tokenistic way, and saying, okay, I covered it. I did something on ADHD, and now I'm covered. My school is doing, putting a tick on the checklist. Please think about issues like who is being represented in this kind of event and story and way of representing ADHD and neurodiversity. Are we actively avoiding using a charitable approach? Like I said, we don't want pity, we want awareness, understanding, and then celebration and connection. Whose voice are we amplifying? Is it the voice of the actual children, of the actual community, or is it some kind of expert notion only we are sharing? And then this does not always maybe present with a useful and conducive to children's lives outcomes. Are you removing the tragedy approach? People say they're suffering from ADHD. No, they don't suffer from ADHD. They have ADHD. Make sure you use the right terminology. They're not all they say about people. They are confined in a wheelchair. I mean, people who are in a wheelchair don't like to hear that, And I'm not saying we're going to change because they don't like it. They're not confined. Yes, there are limitations that the condition brings, and we will not dispute that. And actually, I want to take the opportunity here to say that, some people, for example, Simon Baron-Cohen, who is a very important, researcher at the University of Cambridge on ASD, he feels that the whole notion of neurodivergence may be taking away some of the disability issues and only drawing a positive picture for people, which then might stop people from meeting the needs that people with ADHD and other neurodiversity have, namely taking away their reasonable adjustments and so on. We're not saying that. I think it's important to have a balance. It's important to know there are disabilities related to these. There are needs that we need to address, but it's also a happy continuum. There are limitations and positive aspects we need to celebrate. Are you giving an intersectional understanding of lived experience with a disability? And that is what I mentioned earlier about a wide range, of people who might be having, who might be neurodiverse. Are you opening communication with children and families? So again, that links with bringing in some people to help you even in the Neurodiversity Week, to get it right, to get their perspective. And you'll see that the more buy-in you have from the families and from the people who are affected, the more successful you will be. And is your approach showing the depth and diversity of the community? This links very much, I think, with the intersectional approach. Also, just to make a note, where the tragedy approach is mentioned, I think another way to counteract it is what we mentioned before, the activities with the posters, the positive, what contributions and changes to the world have neurodiverse people created. And all that, I'm kind of backing up with this kind of theoretical approach we take with my colleague as well, Teresa Nash, on transforming the curriculum through a narrative of activism. There is a paper there that you can read at your free time or bedtime reading. If you click on it, it takes you there straight away. You don't need any sign up or permissions. And it is really about thinking about advocacy. It's about the role of the teacher, every teacher, mainstream teacher, teacher in a specialist environment, to actually support and be active, actually be an activist in terms of, how do we meet the needs of all our children. I think this is key, and I keep sharing with my students, and I'm very happy with my Senkos and my student teachers and all the people I meet. I know there are lots of limitations nowadays with funding and so on, but I think we need to also have a very a perspective, that can support us really to keep trying and keep going. So I'll leave you to that really, and just will point you to the fact that at the end you have additional resources, or some of the resources that are referred to, they're all live in the email pack, in the PowerPoint pack we're going to share. Everything is accessible and the links work. So I just hope you find something, just one thing that is right for you, that you want to follow up. And please ask any questions that you'd like to ask, or make a point now regarding all this. And thank you for listening, really.
Thank you so much. And I must say you've done extremely well, despite being in a lot of pain.
Thank you.
We very much appreciate it. I suggest you take, you've taken your screen down. Wonderful, thank you. Any questions from anybody? Anybody want to raise their hand? No. There's so much thought, lots of great ideas.
I can see two of my...
Have you found that there's a certain age when children, when you say they're still too young, would you start in the early years with neurodiversity? Or would you say it's better when they're sort of 7 or 8? Or is there a certain year when the age they have to be when you start the conversation?
From my perspective, Annette, I would start as early as possible because children are so able to see. I wouldn't, obviously you don't want to label, and that is the only difficulty with early years, that often, professionals choose to give people a diagnosis after they are 7, and that happens a lot with ADHD and with ASD. With dyslexia as well, because children wouldn't have been exposed enough to written expression, to be able to be assessed. However, I think the message I'm trying to communicate here today is that what we want to prepare children about is not only, the neurodivergent elements. It's actually that attitude to inclusion and difference, isn't it? The difference is that neurodiversity might be causing to the child. And actually, the earlier you start with the child understanding that some people are different, the better it is. And I've seen it. I've seen it in nurseries, and the narratives, what children tell you about other children is quite fascinating. But also the acceptance that they have at this stage is fascinating. And you see, the older children get, the more they start becoming judgmental, finding the negative aspects of conditions and so on, which to a certain extent is imposed by adults, I believe. Do you see does that make sense? Because, they are more exposed to other people's narratives, whereas they can easily say, oh, Sam learns like that. Or they say things like, oh, he's still learning how to communicate, or he's still learning how to use his hands in a kind way, or he likes to run more than, or he likes to climb trees. For example, in nursery or in early years, a way to address things is to kind of use outdoor environment much more than just being in class, and then emphasize on the strengths of these children on certain areas like this, because often they have strengths in this area. They want to be out, they want to run around, they're best at climbing trees, and then they can actually be helpful in giving instructions to others on how to do it. So I think it's never too early. And the same is for any other EDI issue, Annette, you know, equality, diversity, and inclusion, like ethnicity and bullying in terms of being racist and so on. Of course, you find the right terminology to do these things, but I think it starts so early.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. And it's that sort of celebration that everybody's different.
That's it.
And it makes life much more interesting, you know, if we're all different and some people are short and tall and, you know, all
Absolutely.
the other things. And as you said, then there's that level of sophistication coming down when it comes to neurodiversity, when it comes to,
Absolutely, yeah.
disabilities. Yeah.
I mean, there was an interesting study. It was about a decade ago, I think, with young children in nurseries about identity. And it was very, very interesting that they don't see reality the way we think they do. And then who they identified with was very different to what they looked like. So that you could see that what we impose on them and what we promote, the narratives we promote, really affects the way they are operating. So there were Black children that were asked, who do you look like? And they showed white individuals, and they said, who is a good child here? Do you see what I mean? So it's very, very interesting, and it needs unpacking from early on, and it needs the positive images you need. And we say, and as you say, it's difficult with neurodiversity because it's so sophisticated. It's not a wheelchair, because yes, you can have images with wheelchairs. What will you have for a young child about a neurodivergent child? However, you can actually celebrate how someone is very good at running and doing this quite fast and kind of, so you can, whereas actually they're still learning in other areas, or they might not ever do it as well as. So I think there is scope to do that in a very successful way.
Fantastic. Good. Any other questions? Because if there aren't, I think we should wrap it up. I'll give one more minute, see if anybody raises their hand. There's no questions in the chat. So I think we should say, a big thank you to Paty. You really did a marvelous job. And as I said, we really appreciate you doing it today. We've got a big thank you in our chat bar from one of our participants. And thanks very much for everybody who joined us this evening. Thanks so much. Good night.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, guys.